to Digital Future. So good morning, everyone. I'm Helen Milner from Good Things Foundation. As we wait for people to come online, please do introduce yourself in the chat panel. Say where you are, because it's fantastic that we've got people from both sides of the globe, at least. We have people from the UK and Australia. We have had people joining from other countries too in the past. So please do introduce yourself in the chat panel. So this is episode 7 of Digital Futures for Good. It's our conversation series for 2024. We were anticipating an autumn and November, October-November general election in the UK. And we set up this series to build policy ideas.
Right.
Yes, hello, everybody. Could you please mute yourself?
I'm just listening to it. It's all about.
Can you mute yourself? Thanks, Melanie. So this is Digital Futures for Good, talking about important aspects that affect our society and affect digital inclusion, but very much with a policy lens. We clearly already had our general election, so maybe we can reflect on that a little bit, but it's also great to have Jess here from Australia. So we recorded an interview with Nina Schick, who's a global leader and speaker on on artificial intelligence and emerging technologies a few weeks ago at the wonderful studios at Accenture. So thank you, Accenture, for supporting that. And we talked about the impact of AI on our society and on the people who live in our society. It was really fantastic to talk to Nina. She was just about to move to the US, so I wonder if any of her friends from the US are online here today. But it was great to talk to her about emerging technologies and about the future and the future of technology, but also very much ground that in the reality of the society we have today, where millions of people are digitally excluded and cut off from the very basics that we have. So we're going to try and bring that together. I've got 2 great guests with me today. Kirsty Innes is the Director of Tech Policy at Labour Together. Welcome, Kirsty. And we have Jess Wilson, who I know very well, who is the Chief Executive of Good Things Foundation in Australia. So Kirsty, come to you first. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me, Helen. I'm Kirsty. I'm the Director of Tech Policy at Labour Together. We are a political think tank, and as you can guess by the name on the tin, we're aligned to the Labour Party, and our mission is to support Labour in opposition to start with policy strategy and public opinion insights, and now support the government with those things. And in our tech policy work, our mission is to try and support the government to get the best out of technology, to support people in their daily lives, deliver better public services, and get growth in the economy. So we focus on a bunch of stuff throughout the field of tech policy and have done quite a bit of work looking at AI specifically and how the UK could possibly harness that to make people's lives better.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today. And Jess, over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. It's so lovely to be here. It feels a bit like a family reunion or something, Helen, being together with all of the wonderful people from the UK. I'm Jess Wilson. I'm the CEO of Good Things Australia. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Gadigal country today. We do this in Australia, acknowledge the First Nations people and the land on which we come from. So today I'm on Gadigal country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present here on this land. And of all the lands and people that from Australia are joining us from today as well. It's lovely to see a number of our community partners here. So we have a very similar model to Good Things in the UK. So we work with thousands of community partners all across the country. And for those of you that don't know Australia, it is enormous. And so we have a lot of people in remote parts of the country as well as in our metro areas. And we've been doing a whole lot of work on digital inclusion. But most recently, we've been really looking at AI and the impact of AI and AI literacy on digital inclusion. So we've recently released a report as part of a Digital Sisters program, and I look forward to sharing some of our findings with you today, but it's brilliant to be here.
Fantastic, lovely, thanks. And Jess, everyone will want to know, what time is it where you are?
It is just after 6, so it's not too bad. This is a good time of year to be working globally.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for joining us and eating into your evening. So as I said, a few weeks ago, I had a chat with Nina Schick at the Accenture Studios, and we're going to go to our first clip. So if we could play our first clip, that would be amazing. As you know, at Good Things, we work with thousands of hyperlocal community organisations, really in the heart of quite disadvantaged communities across the UK. And they're all run by really amazing human beings, humbling human beings. And they're using ChatGPT and other tools right now to help people, for example, who are out of work, who are applying for work, to write a good cover letter.
Absolutely.
Someone else had, they were living in not a particularly great rented apartment with a leak. And they had written not a particularly good letter, had been ignored. And so actually ChatGPT actually helped them to compose a letter of complaint to get the leak fixed. And the leak was fixed. So actually, I think that one of the issues that we have is that AI and generative AI is very much in the media. And it's spoken about in a way of it's kind of going to create this wonderful or this fearful future, whereas actually today, right now, people are using it. But people come in, so people who don't know how to use the internet particularly well are coming to these local digital inclusion hubs and saying, what is generative AI? What is artificial intelligence? Do I need to know about it? Which I think is actually a really great question. So it's not like, should I be scared of it or should I be using it? It's like, should I know about it? So what would you say to one of those people in those communities?
I'd absolutely say you should know about it. And using an interface like ChatGPT is already so practical to so many people from all different walks of life, regardless of your kind of socioeconomic background or status. So you mentioned, for instance, how in your communities, people are leveraging the power of a large language model to write letters that will materially help their situation. And they wouldn't have perhaps been able to do that before because they didn't have the access to the right information, or, perhaps didn't know what tone they should adopt for the letter. But the fact that they can instruct a large language model to do that is really incredible. And one of the first and funniest applications I saw on a large language model when they first started emerging is somebody basically created a ChatGPT bot called Do Not Pay. And it was if you were issued a parking ticket, and you know how frustrating those are, those fines. So you could basically just generate the legal letter and all the steps you needed to do in order not to pay that fine. But really what that means is we talk about how knowledge work is going to be automated. My husband is a lawyer, and I know that in certain knowledge industries, such as law, people are afraid that their jobs are going to be automated. But there's another way to look at it, and that is that actually services such as legal services, which are very expensive, hard to access, not available for people in disadvantaged communities, now suddenly are accessible through an AI interface. So that is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
And it's not only somebody in the community who doesn't know how to write a letter for the landlord. By the way, I've been doing lots of visa applications recently, and I'm using ChatGPT too, or other large language models, because it helps me speed up the process. It helps me, it's an enabler, right? Yeah. But you also see it, like I said, all the way to the end on the other spectrum, where you have highly sophisticated, educated biological researchers who are trying to unlock the secrets of the human genome, and they're able to query their data and query their research using the edifice of a large language model. So this is really, people, when they ask you about AI, I mean, this is it, right? It is a meta technology which can be applied to anything.
Yeah.
And that's why you see people using a large language model to draft a letter, or using a large language model to do biological research. And that is just, again, coming back to this very philosophical and fundamental principle of intelligence itself, and how we can now leverage it through machines.
Wow. I think it's great. And the full video of the conversation with Nina is going to be available for us afterwards. Right, now let's go to Jess and Kirsty. Rena, I'm not pinned. I can see everybody. Can everybody see everybody else?
No.
Oh, you can see me pinned, can you? Okay, cool. Maybe I've just got a different view. Okay, that's fine. So, Jess, you mentioned that you've done the work with Digital Futures. No, not Digital Futures for Good, with Digital Sisters. Please do tell everybody what you did. And I think the consultation that you did was really, really fascinating. So what did you find out? What did you do? What did you find out?
Thanks, Helen. So, I mean, a fascinating conversation you had with Nina. I think it'd be, I'm really looking forward to watching the whole thing. But I think, you know, one of the things that we started thinking about, because we've been working with refugee and migrant women in Australia in our program called Digital Sisters. And this has been around basic digital literacy, supporting people to have the skills and confidence to use technology they need. And as part of that program, we started to see people really needing to use translation tools, and this issue of translation not being able to connect with Australian systems and knowledge because of the language barrier. And so we talked quite a lot about the use of AI and how we might do that. And so we got really excited about these opportunities to overcome some barriers for women that we were working with around digital literacy. And then we got some funding from Microsoft and from Telstra, which is a large telco here in Australia, to really look at, you know, looking at AI literacy and how we might develop AI literacy on top of digital literacy. But first I was like, well, what is AI literacy? Can anybody tell me exactly what this is? And, you know, I couldn't find a standard definition anywhere about what that looked like. And so we decided we needed to do some research first. And so we spoke to over 57 organisations. We sent surveys out to our network here in Australia to ask about who's asking about AI literacy, what do people know about AI, and to really look at, you know, whether there might be an opportunity to overcome digital inclusion, digital exclusion with AI. Maybe there's a magic tool that's going to overcome this. But actually what we found, unfortunately, is that's not the case. So, you know, we did find that actually digital inclusion is more important than ever, because we need to make sure people have those essential digital skills, they have the technology they need to be able to even participate in the world of AI. So that was number one. But that it does really overcome some of those barriers, particularly around communication. So it was fantastic to hear some of those examples that you're talking about, and they're similar examples to the ones we've had here. People, you know, being able to write plans or marketing plans for their small business, they're trying to sell things to people in their local community. So helping to do that kind of thing is really, really important. And I suppose the other key thing that we found out is really that AI literacy is this multiple literacy. You have to have multiple literacies to be able to use it. So not only digital literacy, you have to have some sort of language literacy as well. So whether it's English or a different language, you have to actually be able to read and write that to help. You have to have data literacy, so understanding where this information is going and where it's coming from. So what does that look like? But you also need to have this media literacy, so this information literacy, understanding what information is coming to you and how you might be able to, how do you critically analyze that information to be able to decide whether what you've put into the tool in terms of a prompt comes back and is that correct? Or also when you're looking at content that's been created by AI that comes to you through social media or through other kinds of media, whether that's actually being created by AI or if it's been created by a human, like what are the things you need to look out with, particularly when we're talking about scams and online safety. So it's a big kind of focus around that. Fantastic. So there's a whole lot of things, and I could talk about it for the whole hour, Helen, so I won't. So.
Well, we're going to keep going the conversation throughout the hour. But also, I know obviously you've got a great report as well that people can go to. Kirsty, thinking about obviously we had a general election in July. That the rumour is that the new Labour government is going to have an AI strategy. Do you think that the government is thinking about the reality of how people are experiencing AI today in society, as well as like how is it going to change the future? How is the government, and how would you advise them to be thinking about it?
I certainly do. I think that we now, following the election, have a set of ministers and a set of MPs who are the most digitally literate that we've ever had. And I feel really optimistic that this is a group of politicians who get technology and they see the importance of it and they are excited about the potential of what it can bring to people. And at the same time, they are deeply realistic and deeply kind of determined not to be starry-eyed or kind of under any illusions about how complicated and how hard it is to make sure that the benefits of technology get through to everyone and truly benefit the whole of society, not just those who are privileged enough to have ready access to these tools and to already have the skills to be able to engage with them. So I am 100% sure that the work that's going on, led by Peter Kyle in DCIT and elsewhere, is going to be thinking really hard about how the government's kind of stance on AI and the actions that the government takes to set the rules of the road for the way AI works can strike that balance between supporting the fast development and rollout and adoption of the technology and making sure that British businesses can benefit from AI tools as quickly as possible on the one hand, and kind of setting the right environment and the right expectations for the way AI is going to impact real people, so that people can feel confident in using it and feel comfortable that, if you decide to one day experiment and play around with ChatGPT, your data will be sufficiently well protected. You can do that in the confidence that you are safe and your privacy and your rights are going to be sufficiently well respected. I mean, Jess, when you were talking about the different literacies that are layered on each other to properly interact with AI, it struck me that I don't think we do, as a society, yet have a very good understanding of what it means to, to use an LLM like that, or like any of the other large language models that are available, totally, to me as an individual, free, as in it's free, as it is easy to do, and it's free of charge for me. And I can experiment, and I want people to be able to experiment freely and to see what they can get out of it. At the same time, I can see why for some people they're asking themselves, okay, well, if I do this, what happens to the questions that I ask or the information that I input? Is there any risk to me? What kind of things are appropriate for me to ask this tool and what is not? And I don't think that even the most expert amongst us, which is definitely not me, have fully figured that out, let alone that being something that has filtered into the mainstream.
Absolutely, I'm in my optimistic mode with the new government. Is that I definitely want to give them time, and so many things have already got better. I mean, I'm not going to comment on some of the policies of today, literally today, but it's difficult, right? And also the public servants as well. Is that this is about change at a pace. That this is the point about technology, change at pace, and Nina says this is like the birth of modern computing. Actually, it's going to change society in ways that we can't even imagine, but we want our politicians and our policymakers in the civil service, we want our politicians and policymakers to somehow have a crystal ball and know not just all of the ills that need to be regulated, but also all of those benefits and opportunities that can come. Right, let's go to our second clip, because, of course, as a digital inclusion charity, I asked Nina Schick about AI and digital inclusion. So let's go to the next clip.
I'm a massive optimist, so I think that's why we do the work that we do, because we believe that we can add value, we can work in partnership to shine that light, to get that out.
Absolutely. And this is why the bottom up and top down approach need to work together. Absolutely. I think government needs to reassess pedagogy and education and subsidize access to devices, make sure that the kind of infrastructure and connectivity is there, but you need people such as yourselves to work in the community and work with those who are most marginalized to help them understand. So it's kind of this meeting.
Absolutely. And if you think about technology, that I'm optimistic as well, that technology will become ever more intuitive to use. That obviously we can already speak to our devices, and it can automatically translate. So quite a lot of the people that are supported in the community have English as a second language and might not speak English particularly well, but that won't matter because they'll be able to ask the the computer, the device, questions in their own mother tongue?
Absolutely. So because I grew up internationally, I grew up with 5 languages, but I speak 7. But I married a Brit, and you guys are very monolingual. So my kids only speak English. So it's always been, I'm like, it's okay. When my kids grow up, they'll just have like a device, and that is where they can just do instant translation, right? And that again is so empowering when I think about somebody like my mother.
Yeah.
How would she deal with bureaucracy or paperwork in Germany or the UK in a language that she wouldn't be able to read or understand? Well, the fact that you can just run it through a large language, but again, you need to know that that's possible.
But so we need the technology to be better, and the interfaces to be better, and the people designing those interfaces to design them for people like your mother, like the people that we help in communities, and then you need humans to believe that we can make it the society more equal.
And I think that's the most important, because when you talk about the interface being built, for instance, to benefit certain marginalized communities, that's what is one of the most incredible things about this technology being democratized, because fine, you have like these monolithic companies who are building, if you think about the stack, they build the infrastructure, they build the platform, but then on top of that, anybody can build applications. And it's unbelievable you talk to people who are building applications for, I'm sure for refugees and migrants to help them with understanding their visa and their paperwork, all the way to the people who are building applications on top of that stack to understand and interpret the language of whales. So you see incredible communities and initiatives who are leveraging and accessing this new platform for intelligence and using it not only to unlock some of the most interesting questions in biology or science, but actually to help others as well. But this is why I keep coming back to the mindset, right? To understand that, and that's perhaps the most challenging question. The most challenging question isn't the technology itself, and will it develop at a pace where the interface is easy and intuitive? Yes, but how do people understand that they can use it and use it to materially make a better?
Great. So before I go to Kirsty and then Jess, I just want to remind everybody that Digital Futures for Good is a series, and at the end we will have a report. At the end of today's episode, we're going to have a Q&A, so please do start putting your Q&A or your comments in the chat panel. And if you have comments, that will definitely go into the huge hopper that the team is going to be using to create a wonderful report at the end of Digital Futures for Good. So Kirsty, coming to you first, is that the digital divide, my statement is going to be made wider because of AI. How do you think that we as a society, so let's not just put it on the politicians, but they're part of this society, they're part of creating a society that you want. How do you think AI could have an impact on the digital divide, for the good and for the ill?
I was really struck by what Nina said about top down and bottom up, because that's the way I think about the digital divide as well. So I think that the first sort of port of call should be to try and design out the digital divide. We know that we'll never get rid of it completely, but you should design it down so that you are supporting people as soon as they enter education, even before, to make sure that they have access to connectivity and access to devices, and then that helps them to then be able to make the most of the opportunity of education to develop the skills, so that as early as possible in people's lives they are able to start engaging with technology and feel comfortable with it. And I think it becomes a recursive thing, right? So in theory, once you have basic access to the internet and to YouTube, you can go and teach yourself anything. I mean, that's one of the gifts of the internet, right? There are tutorials on there to help you learn to code, to help you learn to use any bit of software that you care to. And now learning to code itself may be redundant in that if you can develop the right skills to prompt an LLM, you can get it to code for you. So I think the opportunities and the kind of the tools that technology is developing and delivering to help us use technology are getting better and more available all the time, but none of that is meaningful if you don't have the basic access to the internet and the basic environment to allow you to sort of start exploring that and have the confidence to start engaging with that to begin with. So I think there is a lot, and I think, as you said in that clip as well, technology and tools are becoming more and more intuitive. And I think the commercial incentive with a globally aging population is for tech firms to design technology that is easy to pick up and as accessible to as many people as possible from the get-go. Remember when things used to come with instruction manuals, like your phone would come with an instruction manual? It just doesn't anymore. You don't do that. And we should never have to do that again, right? But I think there will always be a need for organisations like Good Things Foundation, which can step in where there are people who, for whatever reason, just haven't been included in that, and help them to kind of like catch up, I guess, and get back on board. And you've demonstrated, your organisation's demonstrated time and again how possible and how beneficial that is. So I think that's right. I think there will be. I hope my optimistic take is that there will be a smaller and smaller digital divide, partly as a result of the way technology is developing, but that government and civil society is always going to need to do something to kind of make sure that for the minority that are not included in that, they don't miss out on the benefits.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Kirsty. Jess, I know you're an optimist, so I'm going to ask you a question that is countercultural. So you did all this research and you did all these surveys and consultation. What were the things that people were most scared of about AI?
So I mean, there's quite a lot that people were scared of, and mostly it's the things that we've all heard about in the media. That the number one thing, is that people are scared that they're going to get scammed more, that actually the scam is going to take over the world and that they are going to lose their money. So that's, the AI, and that's fair, because that is happening, and the way that AI is being used in the online world in multiple different aspects means that there is more risk out there, because it's able to get things out there much more quickly, and create things that that people couldn't do so easily before. So I think that's number one, was around online safety. I think the other, it was really interesting conversation we had with our community. So some of the women that have been participating in our Digital Sisters program was just around whether this is actually going to change the way we learn, and they were worried about their kids being lazy. And really not learning enough, and really not knowing how they would do this. And so this kind of societal change of, well, what does this mean for who we are and what we do, I think was a really big thing as well. And I mean, clearly people are worried about the way that their models are designed and whether there's bias within them. And we know that we know that the people that we're supporting in the community have not been involved in the development of these tools, and the models that surround them. So there was a whole lot of comments around that. And I suppose, and about this real concern around what that bias might do in terms of, decisions around recruitment, for example. So if there's a company that is building their HR system and they're using AI to analyze a whole lot of people that are applying for jobs, and they're analyzing that based on the people that are already there, who are all white men of a certain age, then that's going to exacerbate the bias that already exists in society. So I think that was another key thing. And really, I think, this potential to exacerbate the digital divide. So, this concern, and this is the thing you started with, I think, Helen, we know that there is a likelihood that if we don't do something now, the speed at which technological change is happening so very quickly is going to exacerbate people's exclusion from society, unless we have digital inclusion as a key strategy and a key policy domain across governments. And that's the UK, it's Australia, it's actually all across the world.
So I'll let you be positive as well, Jess. So clearly, we've mentioned some already around some of the opportunities around digital inclusion and AI. So what what were the tools that you really thought were like AI is going to help us to close that digital divide?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it is around, the use of the tools for communication. So, overcoming the divide that, Nina was talking about, being able to talk to people in different languages, being able to understand the information. So particularly for the women we're supporting in Digital Sisters, it is absolutely really helping them to understand, what's going on at school. What is it that my kids are doing? So understanding the stuff there to use it by using those kinds of translation tools. So that's been a huge benefit. I mean, I think for people with disabilities, there was a lot of discussion around how these kinds of tools create accessibility for people in a whole lot of ways. And there was one example we heard about an AI tool that had been taught how to do sign language in a First Nations language. And there are 250 plus First Nations languages here. And that was helping people to have conversations with law enforcement or at where there were real risks that people, if they misunderstood, could have a really bad outcome. So that real opportunity around providing people with that. And one last one I would say is just the use, particularly, and this is not necessarily in digital inclusion, but in climate change and managing land. We have large amounts of land here. And one example we were talking about was there's a bird here called the magpie goose, and it's a beautiful, beautiful bird up in the Northern Territory, has its home. But there was a whole lot of issues around the grasses that were there in this kind of breeding ground, and there were only 50 left that were there coming to that breeding system. They were able to use AI to look at what the grasses were, change the way they were managing that land, and actually in a couple of years they had 1,500 birds there. So that's a real opportunities to overcome some of the challenges that we have as society. So I think there's real opportunities, but we need to have the conversation about what society do we want to have and how will the technology support that, rather than the other way around.
Fantastic. Almost like we planned it, Jess. It's a wonderful segue. I just want to pick up a couple of things in the chat panel. So Paul Turk, who works in a recovery college with people with autism around employment, says that he reminds the students that AI is a tool that can help them in their application process and hopefully progress to interviews, but ultimately they will need to convince someone in the interview that they have the skills and are the right person for the job. So that wonderful blend there, I think, from Paul about you're still a human being, like the technology can help you, but you still need to exist. And then Elijah also asked that question, how will AI change human society in the next decade? I'm not sure we're going to answer that whole question, but we will have a go. Let's see what Nina said about AI trends and its uses. So let's go to the next clip.
I think, when you consider automation and job automation, and that is so often the headline around AI, and anyone who says there isn't going to be labor market disruption or that it's only going to be a net good, it's not true. There will be jobs that are going to be automated. I don't know if we do have the wherewithal as a society to prepare for that, especially if you're thinking about it from a top-down, government needs to do something about this perspective. So if you can't rely on the government to prepare for it, then what you can do is prepare by empowering yourself, by doing what you're already doing in the community. So you can't only wait for a top-down approach, but there has to be a bottom-up community-led approach, because ultimately, like I said, if you have the right knowledge and if you have the right mindset, this is tremendously exciting as an enabler, right? It will, I think the way that we think about work itself has to change. And I talk about this to my husband all the time because our kids are almost 3 and 5. And
it's their future, right?
Exactly. But also the kind of advice we were giving when we were growing up and being told, get a professional job in an organization and then maybe you'll be an employee for life and you'll be sorted. That is completely changed. And I see that in my career. I mentioned I grew up in Kathmandu. I ended up here, and then I ended up kind of creating my own business and becoming able to do research in something that really, really fascinated me. That wouldn't have been possible without the internet. It wouldn't have been possible without social media. And I'm super excited for how AI tools, when already you think about, okay, we talked about how it's helping biological researchers unlock the secrets of human DNA, but we already talked about how in the community, it's helping people draft letters, which would have been so out of their reach before. So when you start applying it as an enabler, and the thing is, like I said, we're only in the first innings, right?
Yeah.
And the world that we're going into, people talk about this in AI research, is a increasingly agentic world, meaning you can think about your AI capabilities as your personal agent, right? So you have like your assistant, because you can already do this in the context of kind of knowledge work. And we're at Accenture here today, and I'm sure that they are building very sophisticated large language model capabilities within their offerings to their clients, and also within how they run their own organization internally. So you can talk about it within the context of a huge global business, but you can also consider it in the context of how empowering it can be from a consumer's perspective, especially because these capabilities are going to become more and more accessible. You won't need to have a supercomputer. You can run it on your smartphone, right? So if you think about having your own AI agent that you can instruct, and already we're starting to see the beginnings of that. So if you use Google, for instance, to run your email, you can already get their Gemini assistant. You can be like, dig through my emails and find me this, or just book my travel and do that. Or I need to see a doctor about X. Can you give me recommendations? I'm in London. So almost any challenge or question or query, you can give it to your AI agent. And increasingly, we're going to have this world where AI agents just negotiate with AI agents. So this infrastructure, which will be by design, but also will become the de facto reality. So I think what we will see is entire companies that are basically run by a small group of people, right? So lots of economic opportunity with few resources, being able to leverage that, and also kind of seeing how some of the most challenging questions facing humanity we can begin to make steps towards cracking that with AI. So I'm very excited about how, with the right conceptual understanding and without fear, because there is so much distortion around the AI debate, how this can be such a tool of empowerment for even those who are the most disenfranchised.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure any of us are going to answer the question, is what's the next decade going to bring? I mean, Nina is fantastic, and obviously it's something that occupies her mind a lot. I think for me, and I've already declared myself an optimist, I think at least twice on film and in person this morning, is that I can imagine a future in 10 years' time or 15 years' time where AI is used and that we do rethink what work means. We obviously need to rethink what money means in return for that work. But Kirsty, coming to you first, that just on this very specific point around employment and AI, that at a macro level, we're probably all going to work 4-day weeks and everything's going to be wonderful in about 15 years' time. But what's going to happen to society in this in-between time, and where there is a power imbalance? I mean, Jess and I work with people in communities, with marginalised communities, with people who do suffer prejudice and bias and who don't have a lot of money, is that I have a fundamental worry that we don't create the society that we want quickly enough. So how do you think that we can make sure that we as a society, and let's also think about politicians and policymakers, can move quickly enough so that we do get the society that we want?
Complicated set of questions. I think at heart, I do think that AI is such a significant technological shift, or meta technology, like Nina said, that it will require a whole systems upgrade of our machinery of government and society. So I think it it does mean we need different and better education and skills provision. It does mean we will need to think or rethink benefits and support for people, to kind of make sure people have a decent income whilst they are managing this kind of very fast changing labour market and negotiating with career structures that, as Nina said, look very different from the way they did a few decades ago. I think it does mean we need a different approach to deciding, as in government, what we like and don't like about the way AI is affecting us and how we want it to develop. And I think that the experience of the Online Safety Act showed that going through the full legislative process, which took 7 years in that case, isn't going to cut it when it comes to AI, which is, new capabilities that would have been thought to be completely incredible, literally incredible, 5 years or so, are emerging every single month. I think that one of the most important, but perhaps least sexy bits of the Labour manifesto was the institution of the Regulatory Innovation Office, which is there to support and prod regulators to get better and move faster so that we can get the benefits of new technologies into society as quickly as possible, but with a sophisticated understanding and, with sort of close involvement and monitoring from government to make sure that the impacts are right and are acceptable and are taking us in the right direction. And I think the way the AI Safety Institute has been set up gives us quite an interesting kind of template for that, because that's an example of it's technically not a regulator, but that's an example of a bit of government that needs to be intimately involved with the model developers in understanding the way they are developing their technology and the potential impacts and consequences of those technologies being out in the public. And so it has a level of access and a level of involvement and interaction with those companies that I think is unprecedented amongst other sectors. And it needs to do that in order to make sure that they're developing in a way that is aligned with public interest. And I think we'll need to do not necessarily anything quite so interventionist as that for the large majority of AI-powered tools, but we need to think more along the lines of bodies that represent the public interest and that can move with authority more quickly to make sure that technology is working the way we want it to. And that needs to happen on the basis that we like this technology, we want it, we are, the regulator and the representative of government is not there to stop this or, as a kind of a sort of break on progress, but is there to make sure it happens and happens in such a way as to be consistent with the public interest. So very long answer to your question, but I think there are a bunch of things, of services that government provides and of functions that government fulfills that it will need to do differently as a result of AI over the next few decades.
That's really interesting. And also, I think it makes me feel better that there are people, institutions, etc., thinking about it. I mean, this is a global problem, but obviously we're thinking about it differently, probably in different countries. So, Jess, what's your view of how it's going in Australia, that policy debate?
Well, I mean, I think we recently, in fact, just this week had, the announcement of voluntary standards around the use and development of AI, and in fact, they're currently consulting on mandatory regulation around that, with the intention for that to come in next year. I mean, I agree, it's not moving fast enough, though, is the key thing, and so I think that the challenge for us is to continue the work that we need to do around supporting people to build their knowledge and understanding of AI, at the same time as advocating for the regulatory environment to support people and protect people around that. So I think, it's both, it's together. We need to do this work because, when we were talking about the shift in workspaces and workplaces, and what work's going to look like in 10 to 15 years. Like most people, we were talking to very senior people in Microsoft and Telstra and academics who study this stuff. They're like, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years' time. Like we're so new at this, we don't know, actually. So I think it's really interesting for us to be thinking about this. But one of the things that I heard a number of times from people is, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody that understands how to use AI will take your job. And so I think this whole, this idea that we can avoid it is completely wrong. We absolutely need to be embracing it, understanding it as much as possible, but knowing that it's a tool, it's still a tool. So it's like, what do we want to do? And how might that tool help us do that? So it's really looking at the outcomes rather than going, oh, it's AI, it's going to change everything. Well, yeah, but we have to work out which bit we want to use it for and how it might support that. So I think there's a real shift. I mean, the last thing I want to say about that, though, is just that the human skills that we have around connecting to each other and the importance of some of the work that our community partners do, like, caring for older people in the community, that is not going to change. We're still going to need people to be helping other people face to face every day. And so I think it's like, how do we think about their lives and their work becoming easier, not just the work of people who work in offices in Accenture or in other organizations that are, kind of knowledge thinkers, like it's that kind of space. I think it's like, how do we use that technology to benefit them so they can spend more time with people, have better connections than potentially if they weren't using that kind of technology.
Absolutely. I think, and we've got some good questions coming in. We're going to go to Q&A in a moment, but that we're always going to need oncologists, and actually it's going to be the human aspect of oncologist that we're going to need, because a machine can actually look at the scans and look at the blood tests in a way that a human, better than a human can do it. So actually use the technology to do the things that technology is better at, but using our own abilities. I think, though, and I'm going to get off my soapbox in a moment and go back to Nina and then to Q&A, but is that, supermarkets that currently employ 25 people are going to employ 5 people, right? And so actually that it's so important, as you just said, Jess, is that we understand all of the roles that people do and all of the way that we as humans support our society and support, I'm going to say, wealth creation, because it is about wealth creation and then sharing that money so we have the resources, we have the food, we have the heat, we have the energy that we need. So I think it's so important that we understand it's not just brain work that people do. People do all kinds of amazing things. So one of the things that I do at the end of my interviews for Digital Futures for Good is ask my interviewee what would they do as their first 100 days as Prime Minister. We're going to hear in one moment what Nina said, and then we're going to go to some of the Q&As. Jess and Kirsty, do have a look at the questions, because some of them are quite hard. So let's go to see what Nina would do in her first 100 days as Prime Minister.
In this imaginary world that you are going to become the Prime Minister of the UK, you can always become the US President if you prefer.
I wasn't born there.
So you're the Prime Minister of the UK, and so in your first 100 days, what would you do to fix the digital divide?
So absolutely invest more in infrastructure and accessibility, maybe by subsidizing access to devices. Second, rethink education wholesale. That's a big one.
Yeah.
We have to rethink pedagogy itself. If you're seeing these frontier models, and again, we're only at the very beginning, which on already any standardized test relating to human intelligence or reasoning already outperform or do better than humans. So rethinking kind of, well, what should education look like? And should we judge children just on standardized testing? Yeah. It's more about how can we, going back to that mindset, how can we develop the next generation in a way that they're resilient, that they're flexible, that they have I think the people who are going to do really well are those who are more able to deal with change and who are entrepreneurial. So fostering that from the youngest age. And then finally, as a business owner, there needs to be more in terms of R&D and tax credits and benefits for those who want to invest and build and bring in the right team to develop these technologies, and for industry and government and community to work together, because it's interdisciplinary.
Fantastic. Well, we're working closely with the new government, so we'll make sure that they hear your 100-day plan and maybe they can take it on board.
Wonderful. As I said, that we will be putting out the full conversation with Nina Schick later today. So Tara has told us on the chat panel what keeps her up at night is, and I told you both that these were quite difficult questions, is that she says that she wonders what is the truth and who controls it. So in an AI world, Kirsty, I'm going to come to you first. So in an AI world, how can we know what is true and how can we, I guess, regulate or operate as a society so that we know who controls it?
I mean, great question. And in a weird way, I mean, we're living through this right now. We're kind of in a moment where AI-generated images and video have recently, I'd say in the past year or so, passed the threshold where I couldn't, I don't think I could reliably tell, and I don't think many people can reliably tell if something is real or not. And we've had some very disturbing kind of abuses of that kind of capability when it comes to interaction with democracy. I'm thinking about what happened in the US, where I think ahead of the New Hampshire primary, there were voters received phone calls that were in the voice purportedly of Joe Biden telling them not to bother to go and vote, and that's really disturbing. We haven't yet seen that happening in a very serious or widespread way in the UK yet, I don't think. I mean, we've had the odd deepfake arising, but they've been debunked, and I think we've kind of got off lightly so far. But in a way, I think we are all each at the individual and at the societal level adapting to this world where actually we need to approach written information, images and videos with a different mindset, and we are kind of learning to think more critically and consider context and not necessarily take everything that we see as the truth. That that is something that you might lament or not, but I don't think we can change that. And I think part of the answer to this will be kind of human social adaptation to how we consume information and how we use information. I do think there will be cases where there will be a need for regulation, and one of those where we have spoken publicly about it before is with deepfake nudes, where I think we can't allow a situation where it's trivially easy to create explicit content of women and girls, and publicize that or share that without that being, tightly prohibited and criminalized. But I think the answer, as always, will be a combination of we will figure it out as a society, and there will be cases and bits of it where we need to react at the government level to make sure that we're not suffering serious harms as a result.
And Jess, come to you. So I'm sure the deep fakes and misinformation was something you've already said that came out a lot in your research and your consultation. Is this something that you think we can educate around, not just regulate?
Oh, I think it has to be both, Helen. Like, I don't think, like, there definitely hasn't. And again, this week there's been new regulation put to our parliament around, criminalising the distribution of deepfake materials, like that kind of, particularly using, those tools that take clothes away from women and girls and distributing that, because there's been quite a few cases where that's been happening here in Australia. So I think that regulation around what criminal activity needs to be absolutely there. And at the same time, we do need to be able to look critically and to be able to understand how to fact check information. How do we support people to really understand what's coming to them, and even when they're using those tools, about whether it's correct or not, and to have that kind of different ways, not just trusting blindly what's coming to you, and being able to go, well, actually, about that looks a bit like that's too easy. Maybe there's somewhere else I can check that with. So that different way of thinking really has to be part of what we're doing, and it's one of the challenges that we've talked a lot about, and nobody has come up with how do you teach adults critical thinking? Like nobody has come up with a suggestion with how we do that. So I think we're really looking forward to kind of testing some of our approaches to that over the next 6 months with our community partners. So I think that's absolutely one of the things that we need to continue to support people to do. And in fact, one of the people that we interviewed said, we need to teach people how to be more cynical. And I'm like, I am so an optimist as well, but actually I think that's true. I think there is this thing of us needing to be a little more careful and not just following blindly the information that we get from the internet and going, oh, that's absolutely true. So there's a lot to do to work out how we as a society want to understand and use that information.
And just that also makes our job quite hard when we're in the digital inclusion business, right? Because we know that there's far more media about the dangers of technology, and AI now is bringing a whole new set of dangers. Like you can't even trust, you can't trust that you two people are human beings, right? And so actually we need to make sure that the communications are around. And I think it's fascinating the way that Nina talks about being an entrepreneur, being adaptable to change. Like how do we foster that resilience in people? And I guess that's something that we see in our work every day, don't we, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again it comes back to that stuff about, what is it that you want to do with your life? It's the same conversation we have about supporting people to try technology in the first place. It's like it's not just about the technology. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you like gardening? Do you want to know about how to grow something better? Well, actually, the internet might be able to help you with that. So it's actually finding those key things and coming back to, how the tools support our life. And choosing and supporting people to make the right decisions about the tools that are going to be right for them, and knowing how to do that in a safe and supported way. And just to know as well that we are all at the start of this journey. I am learning something about AI every day. I'm trying it myself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've tried multiple different tools, and I think, it's okay. We're okay. We're all learning about this stuff together, but we really can't avoid learning about it because it's going to change the way we work, live and play. So we must support other people to participate in that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jess. And thank you, Kirsty, for coming along. Thank you, everybody who came and participated, and for your great comments. Ben Carter said in the chat panel that during the shift to digital during COVID, it only widened the gap between the digital included and excluded. And we absolutely saw that digital divide deepened during that pandemic, and people at the bottom of the divide were left further and further behind. So thank you so much, Ben, for your comments, and thank you everyone for your comments today. So we will watch Good Things Foundation on social media. You will be able to find the recording of today's conversation. You will be able to find the recording of my full conversation with Nina Schick, which was fantastic. As I said, we will be taking your comments and your questions from the chat panel, and obviously all the words of wisdom from Jess and Kirsty today as well, and put them into the hopper for the report for Digital Futures for Good. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Jess and Kirsty. I think we could have gone on for another hour at least about this fascinating subject, but it's so important that at this foothills of this new emerging technology that we're focused on not leaving people behind. That absolutely essential that we're having this conversation, and too often this conversation happens far too late. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to Accenture for letting us use their amazing studio in Fenchurch Street. So thank you for coming, and thank you for coming from all over the world. And Jess, have a good evening. And thanks, Kirsty. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Helen.